Hey there, PhD friends, and welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be chatting with Dr. Vera Chan, and Vera is a regulatory medical writer in Paris, France, all right, the very romantic city of Paris, and she will be talking to us about how she went from her postdoc to that profession, the skills that she needed, the skills that you might need if you want to get into that line of work. But before we jump into the video, there are two things I want to talk about. Number one, YouTube has been telling me that you all have been spending a lot of time watching my videos, and I just wanted to say, wow, thank you so much. But if you are watching so much time watching my videos, how come you're not commenting? I don't see your comment. I'd love to hear from you. Are you enjoying this career series I'm doing? Are there videos you want me to make that I haven't made yet? Are there questions? Do you just want to say hi? I actually want to say hi back to you if you've been watching me and you've never said hi. So please comment on this video. Tell me where you're watching from. Say hello. Say something so that I know that this is helpful to you all. And then the second thing is, if you haven't already, make sure to sign up for my free training where I give you 3 tweaks you can start making right today, okay, on your LinkedIn profile that will really help you stand out to recruiters once you start applying for these jobs. Okay, all right, let's jump right into the interview. Hello, Vera, and thank you so much for joining me here on The Bold PhD. So we'll jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Hi, G. Thanks for having me. My name is Vera, and my background is PhD in life sciences. I also had research experience as a postdoctoral researcher for another 6 years. So education-wise, I am scientist, full-fledged biologist, and I have a lot of exposure in publication, scientific reading and writing and researching. So that's my background. Currently, I am a medical writer in regulatory affairs, regulatory medical writing.
And when you talk about regulatory medical writing, what is it that a regulatory medical writer, what do they do?
Right. So if you ever notice, since I was coming from a marine science background, I have never worked on human trials. But if you ever thought about science coming from human study, there is a lot of regulation involved because hopefully they won't feed any poison to a healthy patient and kill someone accidentally. So there is a lot of rules and procedures in the middle of, like, before a clinical trial can even start. And that will require a lot of scientific sound reasoning behind why someone needs to be treated with this new drug. If it is first time used in human, a full report needs to be written on what are the evidence, what are the dosage that are proposed to be used. After you have maybe a mouse study, rabbit study, monkey study, then it's still very difficult. So this is a process that will require a lot of scientific understanding and also scientific writing to communicate the benefit and the risk of conducting a clinical trial on new medicine product. And this process is called regulatory writing. There are all kinds of documents, and I won't go into detail, but the point is these are the communication pieces for regulatory agencies such as FDA in the US, MHRA in UK, ANSM in France, where I'm living. So these people decide whether it is safe and is a sound reason you're putting human at risk to conduct a trial. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, that is great. No, that's great. I was on mute. That's wonderful. So so on a daily basis, so I'm glad that you explained what regulatory writing is. It's writing within the sphere of writing documents that the governments or the government agencies that regulate clinical trials, making sure that we meet all of those regulatory rules before any clinical trial for any medication or medical device can actually happen. So thank you for explaining that. So in your role, right, because I know that depending on what type of a regulatory writer you are, or which company you work with, you may be doing something slightly different. So what does a day, what does your daily routine look like? I know you have a remote role. Am I correct?
Yes, at this moment, I have a partial remote. I have 2 days in office, 3 days at home.
Okay.
So for now, but I know medical writing can differ from company to company, and yeah, so there are many fully remote position. Given if you, especially for people who are fully experienced and they can work
Right.
on their own. Yeah, but for people who are just breaking in, I know that most company may prefer first like onboarding that is more based in office.
Mm-hmm.
My typical day, I so that would differ by office day or staying at home day. But I
Mm-hmm.
would break it down into several components. First is the meeting, because I work for at this current position, I work for a consulting company. So before I write anything, we have a lot of meeting communication to make sure we understand the scope, the purpose of the document, why we need involvement of a medical writer in the project, also the expectation and timeline of how fast they want the project to be written and under what scope. So that is so-called a meeting, scoping meeting or discussion, technical meeting for medical writer. It's very important when most people can assume medical writer only needs skills of writing. It's not true, because I think most of that skills, a good writer must also have good communication skills, active listening skills when they are having a meeting, and taking down plenty of notes of all the expectation points covered in the meeting, and make sure we deliver over the expectation of clients. Now, the other components include also reading and writing, and I don't have to explain writing since it's obvious, but reading would also mean reading source documents that could be confidential document provided by clients from maybe the historical, non-clinical study, clinical study. And sometimes I said that regulatory writing is before a trial, but actually to fully close the loop, we also have a lot of document prepared like during the monitoring phase, like safety reports annually. When the company is sponsoring a clinical trial, they are responsible in communicating every year, in most cases, to the agency on counting how many people may have a safety issue. And also, by after the end of a trial, there is a requirement we must provide a report within 1 year after so-called database is locked. Like there's statistical analysis, very complex. The whole department, there's the statistical people that will do the analysis. But once data is so-called finalized and locked, there is a timeline we must meet within 1 year. The company is obliged to deliver a study report. It's like a thesis for PhD student, like 200, 300 pages. So I have also been responsible writing those reports. And in those cases, I will ask for lots of original statistic data, reading and understanding what they mean for that context, and interpret it for the client and write it in a succinct way, so that is communicate fairly the scientific ground of everything covered in the trial. And then maybe after, there is also a stage after trials are all completed, the applicant may need to submit marketing authorization, and that would not need the original data interpretation, but that's needing the reading of several clinical study report, non-clinical report, and then writes the narrative of why this patient, why this medicinal product is so-called more benefit than risk. For example, COVID vaccine, we need to count how many people may have a safety issue and how many percentage have people benefiting from the vaccine. And for sure, right now, recommendation says we need to take vaccines because safety, there is not benefit is greater than risk. So every marketing authorization needs to write this type of narrative, and it's a very difficult reading and writing assignment for me. And I'm working right now also on this type of project. And to me, as a PhD person, like biologist at the PhD level. I think this is a really engaging, intellectually challenging role to be. And and I enjoy this day-to-day exchange with clients. And also the last part of my day-to-day is to read guideline, because every country is, depending on which country you want to apply for marketing authorization, there are different rules. So they're slightly different by country. So that's why consulting company like my company is great for the clients, because they will provide the right set of advice for what they wish, which country they wish to apply this type of application, and to give them this, to save time and money for application as well. So reading is also very important in guideline, which is quite strange for PhD student, because it's like more like law. Studying law, you read all this government. It's like a list of law that you have to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it even jumps into the question I was going to ask you next, which was the skills that you need in your role as a regulatory writer. And I'm really, really glad you brought up the subject of reading a lot. So this is one of the things that I tell people that approach me and say, hey, I want to become a medical writer. Will I be writing all day? And I'm like, no, that writing is, yes, it's a great portion of it, but more than likely you're going to be studying a lot. You're going to be reading a lot. I work in medical writing too, and I work in a marketing role, and there are projects that come my way, or projects that I'm assigned. I know nothing about that topic, and I have to educate myself from scratch. So I find that the skill of actually being able to self-educate and understand things and then communicate that is so important. Would you agree, Vera?
Oh, 100%. I agree. Absolutely. Reading and listening are the two biggest strengths, I think, for most medical writers that comes inherently. And yeah, I think it's really important and valued in our role, because you only have things to write after you understand what you read, what you have to write. And sometimes we offer added value by removing what is not needed in the document. There may be several 10, 15 pages of copy pasted figures and tables that are not needed for the agency. And we adding the value by knowing the rule and telling them this is not in the guideline. We don't need all this. This will confuse the FDA. They will be, this will put your document into very bad light. So I think that's a really educated advice that clients will value. And this is also something medical, it's not essentially writing, but you are shaping the communication by presenting the information properly on a document.
Absolutely, absolutely. So apart from, obviously now we know writing is a huge chunk, educating yourself, understanding things, and being able to communicate that with a client or with the person that you're writing this for is hugely important. What other skills would you say were valuable to you? Because you went through a PhD, you went through a postdoc, and then you became a medical writer. And when we first connected somewhere in 2020, I remember you were just starting your medical writing journey. So what helped you when you were transitioning away from academia?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, first of all, kudos to our friendship. It's been more than a year. Time flies.
Almost, yeah, it's survived the pandemic.
And you look great. We all survived. And I think it's funny. But actually, in hindsight, I don't really see myself having left academic setting, because I felt like this might be the most academic you can get in the industry. I mean, I have, and my sample size is a lot much larger than my previous like experiments when I was one person as a postdoc.
Right.
So arguably, I don't really feel like it is completely outside of academia. Like sometimes I felt like I'm the nerdiest person in the company. And somehow it's a safe space. People tolerate that and they appreciate our nerdiness. And I just really enjoy this. Yeah. Sorry, I lost the train of thought of the question.
Yeah, no, no, it's good. It's good. It's good to be in spaces where your nerdiness is appreciated. I know that firsthand.
Yeah,
But I
the
think the question was
transitioning.
the transitioning, like what skills, right? Because one of
Ah,
the things that
yes.
I find, yeah, one of the things that when people reach out to me about, hey, how did you do this? One of the
Yeah,
biggest things is what skills do I need, right?
yeah,
How
right,
do I
right.
prove, how do I prove to an industry I've never worked in that I'm
Mhm.
worth taking a chance on?
Wow, great question. First of all, I would say we have everything we need. Most people, because
Yeah.
I would say historically, medical writers never needed a PhD. But most people that had a bachelor's, I mean, I've seen phenomenal medical writer that has master's degree, bachelor's degree. You just need to get started and work on understanding guideline and just practicing reading and writing medical documents. Um, I would say how to shine at an interview is to show that you have done the homework of the jargon, the guideline, like what is the ICH E3 guideline, that is the guideline for CSR. What are these jargon of like adverse events, AE, and then pharmacovigilance is PV, like these are the jargon that PhD student may not essentially know. And I think by speaking with people who have this experience, they can, how to say, incubate that knowledge on jargon. And when you interview, you can demonstrate that you are able to connect with stakeholder quickly, and because people would not use the full term after they use abbreviation. So I think learning all this jargon and busting all of this jargon before you have an interview will make you shine, and also know that your PhD training is going to help you very much in writing and reading. Like if you are the type of person that enjoy reading non-document, understanding statistical data, science, and and not getting impatient when you have a long guideline to read, like 30 page of guidelines sometime or 100 pages. And yeah, like if you are the type of person that not impatient at a board game, for example, there are several people, right? At the board game, they will be like, oh, I will read the rule and then understand what is the next step. Or some people just get impatient, never read the rule, and they lose the game. So I think medical writers are the type of people who will take that as an enjoyment, like reading the fine print. I do think PhD students who have written thesis, who have written publication, they are above and beyond qualified for serving as medical writer in regulatory context.
Absolutely. I'm gonna absolutely agree with that. One of the additional things I tell people is beyond your PhD thesis, because going into certain types of medical writing rules, your PhD thesis may not be the type of writing that they're looking for. So depending on the type of writing you're trying to get into, it's always helpful to have maybe some sample of something that you wrote, which goes back to Vera's point that know the jargon, right?
Yeah,
If you're coming into my role as a marketing medical writer, you may want to think about, okay, what's search engine optimization, what does a blog consist of,
yeah,
what's a white paper, right? You may want to go and learn what those things are and maybe
right.
try to create something so that when somebody asks you, have you ever written a white paper? You're like, hey, I wrote this, thing, and I think it's pretty cool. And here it is. So I absolutely agree with you, Vera, when you say go and familiarize yourself with
Yeah,
what is common in the industry. What are they asking you for? One of the mistakes I made when I was first trying to move out of academia was I was just putting my resume everywhere without really, which is a huge mistake, without really
yeah,
tailoring it or even speaking to the skills they were looking for, right? And that's
right.
that's where a lot of people get frustrated because as PhDs, like you said, we have everything we need. We're overeducated,
Yeah,
right? And so now we think that, okay, if I have all this education, people should be impressed. People
yeah,
must be impressed. But the truth is that, while yes, it's impressive, when you're applying for roles outside of academia, it's really important to speak to that particular industry and to demonstrate that you know what goes on in that industry. Do you have something to say about that, Vera?
Well, I resonate so much. This process, I think, is more in. I have made a video actually on this on testing, but like you have to first ask yourself introspectively the questions, like what type of person you strive to be, or what type of person you are known to be, and if that role doesn't align to what you the person type you are, then maybe it's going to be difficult when you start. Like for example, I think I'm naturally good at just sitting there at home and not going out to the real world and read. And I'm quite resilient just being in my little capsule. Most people may feel exhausted by not having social interaction. But I'm not extroverted enough. I think I would struggle, for example, in a role as a sale or an MSL position that you require traveling and require scheduling appointment to pack the schedule every day to meet many KOL. But I would read trials and clinical study, explain it, understand it, but MSL explain it by telling people what it is. And for medical writer, we write it, and I prefer to write than to talk. And I think that's a very important internal dialogue. Everyone needs to do the homework, right? And I think just sending our resume is one homework. But before you do that, I was glad my application to become a sales rep wasn't accepted. My application of becoming in the QA department wasn't accepted because, like it was also, if you send this resume based on insecurity, then it probably wouldn't end well. I think it should start from inside, and then identifying what is the skills you are proud of. People say, oh, she's great at this. Maybe you're good in the lab, then maybe that should be strategized towards R&D position.
Right.
So I think, yeah, that thinking process needs to start first, and then the resume should match what you're trying to pitch.
Absolutely, absolutely. This was such a great conversation, Vera. Now, I want to add on here that Vera does have a YouTube channel as well. It's called PhD Coffee Time, and she covers a lot of her channel definitely is more academic based because she goes into software and productivity tools. And so if you're into that stuff, I highly recommend it. It's a very high quality channel, to go find her there. But where else can people find you, Vera?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter, and you feel free, you can put my handles in maybe description of the video. And if they search PhD Coffee Time, I also created pages for Instagram and Facebook. But since I got busy now with work, I haven't been updating them very much. But yeah, thanks for mentioning the channel. I created those for mostly I like notes taking. It's like my retrospective video notes for my PhD, since I think I will forget all of that software part next year if I don't do it. Yeah. But yeah, so they can reach out on all the social media. I'm on everywhere.
Thank you so much, Vera. This was such a great conversation.